Good afternoon, everyone. And we apologize for the delay, but we're happy to welcome you to the Religions for Peace USA webinar, which is we're welcoming the Reverend Fletcher Harper, the Executive Director of Green Faith, as well as a PhD student, Ethan Bodnarik, who is a PhD student at SUNY up in Syracuse studying ecological engineering. Our webinar today will focus on the importance of climate change divestment and the efforts that Green Faith carries out in many different variety forms and all sort of well recognized as a leader in the field of interfaith activism around the issue of climate change. Ethan is also the moderator or co-moderator of the North American Interfaith Youth Network and has done a lot of good work in that area as well. So he'll be able to bring that perspective to the fore. Again, my name is Aaron Stauffer. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Religions for Peace USA, and I'm happy to bring to you Reverend Fletcher Harper, who will speak about the issue of climate change and climate change divestment. Fletcher, do you want to just go ahead and jump right in?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it, and thanks for your patience with my technological issues. It's great to be with you all, and great to be with Religions for Peace, and good to connect with Ethan. So I think the place where the story needs to start really is back in 2009, which is a long time ago. There was once upon a time there was a hope that we'd be able to get climate change legislation through the federal government and really get ourselves on a path to solving or starting to solve this problem in a serious way. And what happened was that once the Tea Party came into power, that possibility really just disappeared. And so for the last 5 years, we've been in a position where, one of the biggest issues that we face as a human family is getting worse, and the government's unable to act. We had done climate change-related advocacy for a while, and we're just getting frustrated by the fact that there just really was no point to doing legislative advocacy on climate change when it was clear the government was gridlocked. And what faith communities have done traditionally over time is that when there's a major sort of social concern that has been an intractable one for a long period of time, where the harm that's caused to people is really massive, faith communities have looked at divestment as a tactic to try to shift the culture and try to create cultural momentum towards a solution for the problem. Bill McKibben, the environmentalist, wrote a really strong article in Rolling Stone magazine back in late 2011. And within the coming year, there was a divestment movement in relationship to fossil fuels that was underway, and we got involved in late 2012, and are working now with representatives of about 6 different denominations on a sort of a formal level, and then working with denominational activists sort of across the board with a lot of different denominations. And the divestment work's taking three basic forms. One of the forms it's taking is resolutions that are making their way through the resolution-oriented process to establish policies in a bunch of different denominations at this point. And the advantage of that process is that people have to debate it. If it's a resolution that comes in front of the denomination, people can't avoid the debate. And so last summer, thanks to an activist clergy person named Jim Antal, the United Church of Christ voted to divest from fossil fuels. That was the first national vote, national denomination to move forward with that. The Unitarian Universalist Association voted and encouraged all of their congregations to study divestment, and in this coming month, they, along with the Presbyterian Church USA, will be voting on national resolutions related to divestment. There are earlier stage resolutions making their way through a number of other denominations: the United Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the Quaker community. So the resolutions process is started and is gathering some momentum, which is great. We've also seen, and this is a really vital piece of the picture, we've seen a growth in the number of faith communities that are starting to have sermons on this topic and starting to have do discussions, Bible studies, educational forums, where they're starting to debate this on a local level and really sort of getting into what are the ethics around this. And it's very interesting. I was a parish priest for 10 years before I got started with Green Faith, and I learned over time that if you want to have a really good ethical discussion in a congregation, the way that you do that is you don't say, let's have a good ethical discussion. You talk about money, and then you get a good ethical discussion, whether you like it or not. And that's what these discussions do in faith communities. They really challenge people to say, what are my deepest values? For a lot of folks, it's there's some variation on where your money is, there your heart will be, and so your money needs to be your money needs to be managed and invested consistent with your moral values. And when you've got an industry such as the fossil fuel industry that's caused massive harm, that has very effectively delayed legislative action on climate change, that has massive financial resources that it deploys to prevent that legislation, and also to keep on exploring for new sources of oil and gas, then the argument's a good one. I'm not saying it's a predetermined outcome, but the argument's a strong one. So we've been doing outreach, and we've got clergy in over 1,500 congregations around the U.S. who have pledged to do a sermon on the topic of divestment. We've got over 5,000 faith communities around the country that have pledged to do a discussion forum or a religious ed program on the topic. So this is, these are good numbers. This is starting to it's starting to move. So we've got resolutions that have happened. And that are happening, education, and then you just see an increased amount of willingness on the part of faith communities to be part of what I would call public action on this. So whether that means showing up at demonstrations or taking part in coalitions with secular groups around fossil fuel divestment campaigns for state or city pension funds, that sort of thing. You see faith leaders starting to get involved in civil society on this also. So I think that the momentum has built really rapidly. This campaign's really only been underway for less than 2 years in faith communities. It's getting a lot of traction. We saw earlier this spring in April the Jesuit magazine America, which published the interview with Pope Francis a couple of months ago. They published an article written by one of our Green Faith Fellows that made the case for Catholic colleges and universities to divest. So you're seeing, we've got a theological, a sign-on statement for theologians and ethicists that we're going to be releasing in June. We've got over 60 very well-respected ethicists and theologians and religious leaders who've signed that statement calling for faith communities to divest and to reinvest in a clean energy future. And, among others, Desmond Tutu and Alan Bosak, who were two of the key leaders of the South Africa divestment and anti-apartheid movement, have signed onto that, along with a number of other well-known theologians. So, I think you can make the case that this campaign is a force to be reckoned with. And, for those who would dismiss it as, cavalierly, I think the message is that the major institutions of our society, which are supposed to reckon with an issue like climate change, have failed to do so. And this movement represents a very grassroots, very democratic expression of grave concern about an issue that really warrants that level of concern. So I think that it's, the reality that we face is a sobering and stark one. And I think this movement is a sign of energy and a sign of hope from the people, in a profoundly moral way about the urgency of facing this issue. So why don't I stop there and get down off my soapbox for a second, and we can do a little bit of back and forth.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I really liked how you focused on our deepest values for that, and I think I'm really excited to hear you talk about divestment, because I don't think it is enough for us individually and in our faith communities to do energy savings on our own. We really do need a worldwide and government approach to solving climate change. And I just think it's really interesting as faith communities, we can focus on this maybe a different way than is done politically a lot of the time, with humility, with hope, and trying to heal some of the polarization that goes on in our country, because we're just so polarized, you know. But there's the tension of we're fighting for change, we're fighting against the status quo, like money and power in our government, but we want to do it in a way that's based on healing and values, and so it's quite a challenge, you know.
Well, it's really interesting. What we found, when we did our email campaign to encourage people to do a sermon or a discussion, we emailed to a list of people that was not just sort of liberal activists. I mean, it was a very sort of moderate to even moderately conservative list of people that we emailed to. And we find that when you start by establishing that this really is an issue of values, that this is an issue about the deepest values that we hold, and then you raise up the really unarguable facts of the situation, that really does bring people together. People want action on this. They believe that action needs to happen. They have concerns. Despite the polarization that you mentioned, there are clear common values in terms of respect for life, in terms of respect for God's creation or God's earth, respect and responsibility for future generations, leaving a responsible, healthy legacy. All of these are shared values, and it's a shame that we've not been able to get action up till now. But I think that one of the hopes of this movement is that it can shift the center of gravity culturally, so that people say, you know what, we need action now. It's time.
Yeah. Especially, you hear a lot about how people are concerned that China has surpassed us as an emitter of greenhouse gases, but our per capita emission is still 4 times that of people there, and so it really does take action at a global level, and we have to lead the way if we want other countries to do that too. So.
Yep. And I think, we've been very, very blessed in this country. We have a lot to be proud of, and a lot to be grateful for. And I think that this challenge, and it is a challenge, represents an opportunity for this country to become great in a new way. I think that it's a time when the innovation and the ingenuity and the can-do spirit that the United States prides itself on can really rise to the occasion. I mean, we've got people who are finding ways to deploy financing for solar arrays in new ways. We've got people who are getting wind turbines to function more and more efficiently. I mean, I think we've got to recognize that this is a challenge that we can meet. And by meeting it, we'll create new jobs, we'll create new industries, and this is good for the United States. I mean, a couple of years ago, the Bureau of Labor Statistics did a study where, for the first time, they classified what they called green jobs, which were jobs related to some form of environmental-related service. And they found that there were almost as many green jobs 4 years ago as there already were in the fossil fuel industry. So this is not a sort of a sidebar issue. This represents our future, and it can be a positive future, but we've got to act. It won't do it for itself. We've got to do it.
Yeah, I think sometimes climate change activists or people working hard on it, they can be labeled as anti-business or anti-progress or something. But like you said, there's all sorts of numbers that show that pursuing protection of the environment and renewable energy adds jobs. It keeps jobs local. You don't have the boom and bust cycles of energy extraction and things like that. There's a lot of great information out there, and focusing on that, I think, also points to the hope and the healing that we want to bring about as people of faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And you almost every single building in the country could use an energy efficiency retrofit. I guess there are a few buildings that are pretty good, but there are more than there used to be, thanks to the good work of groups like the U.S. Green Building Council. and lots of local energy efficiency and renewable energy contractors who've been hard at work. But I mean, Lord knows, there's so much work that can be done, and those jobs can't be outsourced. They have to happen locally. You can't pick up a building and send it to China and retrofit it and then send it back. It's got to happen here. And you know, at a time when in our economy, you know, we see this widening gap between the rich and the poor, which is obviously not good for society, and it's not good for the common good. You know, these are important opportunities for creating jobs that can lift people to a decent life. And you know, the data is increasingly there that with the right policies in place, this can be done. It's not a pipe dream.
Yeah, there's been all sorts of studies coming out about, you know, hitting targets of 80% renewable energy or different things like that by different dates, by 2030, things like that. And, I'm also a scientist, as you heard, so I'm interested. The Union of Concerned Scientists has a great plan to cut oil use, and so it's just how can we all work together to do this and to hold our political establishments accountable, because it is feasible. So if we're not doing it, that's a problem.
Yep. Well, and I think that's where, I mean, we've called our work on the divestment issue, we call our campaign Divest and Reinvest Now, because we believe that you need a stick and a carrot. It's not enough to have one or the other. I mean, you know, human beings do, you know, and I think it's a reality, human beings require some urgency. And I think that a call for divestment, when it's well-reasoned and sort of ethically legitimate, which it absolutely is in this case, is you know, represents and signals a sense of urgency in a way that very, very few other things do. And it sends the signal that the status quo is just very simply not acceptable. And at the other hand, then you've got the carrot, which is the types of job creation opportunities. I mean, I would love to see what it would look like if there was a collaboration amongst different faith communities that had assets to invest. You know, what would it be like if North American faith communities or U.S. faith communities in that position pooled some resources and talked with some really sharp renewable energy investors about investment opportunities for creating clean energy systems in Africa, for instance, or ramping up those systems. I mean, I've got to believe that done properly, there are opportunities there that would be deeply consistent with the mission and values of our faith communities, and that would also yield a return. It might be different from the kind of investing that faith communities have traditionally done, which has been to invest in the stock market and in better established companies. And it's even different than some of the sort of socially responsible investing, which usually, you know, which is very good and which employs certain sort of screens and selection criteria to identify publicly traded companies. But you know, I think we need to think outside the box. This crisis that we face requires it, and the good thing is there are a lot of smart people that are ready to go to work on this. It's the cultural and then political context that needs to shift so that they get empowered to do what they can do.
Yeah, your mention of Africa just made me think of another, you know, co-benefit of this work as sustainable development, that, you know, in a lot of places you don't need a whole lot of electricity to make a difference if you can just get enough for some lights for people to extend their productive hours and be able to read and teach, you know, families how to read each other, to read at night and things. That can make a big difference. You get cell phones in, you know, be able to charge your cell phone without going an hour to the biggest city. All that kind of stuff can make a huge difference as well.
Yep, and you know, and to add to that, if you have clean cooking fuel in the, you know, in rural homes, so that you don't have women and children and the elderly and, you know, entire families exposed to dangerous, you know, dangerous air pollution indoors. I mean, I saw some studies about 2 months ago that said that indoor air pollution in India alone kills more than 500,000 people a year. I mean, this is, you know, and this is people needing fuel to cook with. I mean, it's a basic human need. And we need to get, you know, we all need energy. Energy is a great blessing and a great gift, but we need clean energy. I mean, there was another study that came out about within the past year that showed that in the northern part of China, which is the more heavily industrialized part of that country, where there's a great deal more coal that's burned, that life expectancy was about 5 years shorter for people in that part of the country than elsewhere. And it's shorter. That's 5 years for 500 million people. That's 2.5 billion years of lost life from air pollution, from fossil fuel. I mean, we can do better than that, and we have to do better. And I think that the old kind of logic was, okay, this is the price you have to pay, and it's only when you get wealthy that you start to care about the environment. But that math just doesn't work anymore. First of all, it's not true. There are technologies that can help us avoid that most heavily polluting part of the spectrum. I mean, what's really, what's needed is you need civil society, faith communities that are educated and informed about this and actively working to shape their culture around these values of the protection of life and the promotion of a genuine well-being and prosperity, and it can work.
Exactly. Aaron.
Sorry. So I want to get to a sort of question that I've been sort of in the back of my mind for the last couple of minutes is I see all the need for this, that there's ample evidence, there's ample sort of people actually doing the work. But talk to me a little bit about how local congregations can get hooked up to this movement. How do they go about actually doing this? I mean, the importance is there, the peoples are there, the values are here, but what do local congregations, what do the viewers now need to know, and where can they go find that to hook up to this movement?
Well, we'd love, we have a program at Green Faith called our Energy Shield program, and that it's like a scouting merit badge for faith communities. So you do, over the course of a month, you offer some prayers on behalf of responsible energy use and for people suffering from climate change. You do some education about that, and then you take some very concrete basic steps in the faith community to conserve energy on that level. And then you also give the members of that faith community a checklist of 8 steps that they can take at home. And they don't have to take all 8, but and what we find is, the congregations that take those steps, they save money, they engage their members in a meaningful way, and if they get 15% of their members to fill out that checklist and hand it back in, then they get the Green Faith Energy Shield. So we give them an electronic merit badge and a big parchment says Energy Shield in the name of the faith community, and it's printed on recycled banana fiber, which it doesn't smell like banana, but that's what it's printed on. But so that's what, and that includes some advocacy work. I mean, another way that faith communities can get involved, Interfaith Power and Light. The Interfaith Power and Light movement does excellent legislative, U.S.-focused legislative advocacy on climate issues, and so that's another place to look. There are Interfaith Power and Light chapters in many states. So, I would say between those two options, that's there's an option for what people can do on a very, very local level and also on an advocacy level. And I should say our website is greenfaith.org, and if people go to the programs tab, they'll see the tab for the Green Faith Shield, and that's where to find out about the Energy Shield.
Absolutely, and all of that information, all the organizations you mentioned there will be available right below this webinar too, so that's extremely helpful. Ethan, do you have any more questions? I've got a couple here from the audience, but I want to give you any space.
Yeah, go ahead with the audience questions.
Well, I think there's an interest on not only connecting in and sort of taking those practical steps, but what are the best ways to engage with people who are less likely to be sort of convinced of the importance of them, not necessarily of the reality of climate change, but are sort of inundated with this reality that it's too big of an issue for them to sort of tackle. And how do you convince everyday people, lay people on the ground of the importance of taking practical steps?
I would say, I mean, Ethan, I'd be curious about your thoughts on this. I'd say, I mean, I'd take 2 approaches. One is to say that honestly, this is really a big issue. I mean, I don't think you can pretend it's not. and to say to people, we need to pull together hard now for a period of a couple of years to get some policies in place that are going to make this problem one that we can manage. And it's going to take some work, and it's going to take some attention, and we need that now for a couple of years to make that happen, and to ask if they're willing to to create a little bit of bandwidth to pay attention to these issues, because the global community is really trying to sort of pull itself together and to say we need to get a treaty now. We need to make this happen, and one of the things that's going to be really important is over the next couple of years to show that civil society cares about this. So I think that's one thing. We're going to be launching an international campaign at the event in New York City that we're doing this event this September with Religions for Peace that we're really excited about, to encourage faith communities to do this and to make some bandwidth, and we'll have some very specific resources with that. I think the other, that's a sort of larger sort of movement style approach. I think the other approach is to say, you know what, it's big, but everything needs to, start local and go to work, get your own temple or church or mosque or synagogue, and see if you can't save some money by cutting your energy use. And we can help folks with that. That's part of what the Energy Shield does, and make it financial. Say, look, let's just let's be good stewards of our financial resources and approach it that way. So I think that I think both approaches are important, but those would be two things I'd suggest.
Yeah, I think faith communities, they have such an important role in the ebb and flow of our lives, and checking in with the deeper source regularly. And so, like what you said before, if faith communities can help, environmental awareness and action just be a regular part of people's lives, then it just becomes more natural. And I think, in the North American Interfaith Youth Network I'm a part of, we're excited as young adults to be working on these topics. I've seen both in school and in this group that young adults have a lot of energy and enthusiasm for it. There's a lot of ways you can have fun teaching about composting and hands-on stuff, like little kids love all the little worms and dirt and everything. So there's just a great way to have fun and kind of connect to the earth, which I think is something we're missing in our lives a lot too.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm 51 years old. I would say that I think it's really vital that people in my generation and older have people who are in their teens and 20s sort of look us in the eye and say, we need your help with this. We really do. This will affect all of us, but there is there's a sins of the father getting visited on the children kind of dynamic with this, and I think that I think that that's legitimate. I think that's very fair for people who are in their teens and 20s to say, it's time to lead now. It's time to step forward. This has to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, I want to go ahead, please. I don't want to cut you off.
I was just going to do another shout out for that September 17th event that we're going to be doing in New York, Aaron, and to say that we'll be sharing, you and I will be sharing more information about that and ways that people can be involved. Also, over that weekend of either Saturday the 20th or Sunday the 21st, there's going to be a large climate march in New York City, and we're going to be providing ways for people who are in the greater New York area to, or who want to travel from out of town to be part of that, but also for people who want to, who aren't going to travel to New York City for that, but who want to have some kind of observance in their own local faith community, to do that too. So I think, there are going to be ways to make our voices heard that are going to be important.
Absolutely. It seems to me the importance of making sure and providing the resources, not only the knowledge, but just the capacity and the support to these local faith communities to take action on such a, I think, Fletcher, I think you're absolutely right to say that, all movements start somewhere, even if it is such a large issue and such a large problem. We need to begin in our own context where we are in order to actually make any difference. Things don't just sort of happen. We have to take action and build constructively through conversations and collaborative work together to actually build this movement. So I think you're right on, and I look forward to the September 17th event with Green Faith. I think that'll be a fantastic time to have an international conversation with national leaders around how we go about sort of continuing the work that Green Faith has engaged in so successfully already. So, thank you both. I want to, part of what we're trying to do with these webinars now is to keep them short and sweet. So I'm sorry to cut you both off, but I think we ought to wrap it up. And I really thank you both for giving such a such a sensitive and insightful conversation, both from the youth aspect there, Ethan, as well as the scientific aspect. And Fletcher, you're both, I think your 10 years of experience in the parish, I think shines through your sensitivity for someone, for how a congregation actually can go about and tackle such a large issue. Those are both very needed perspectives in this conversation. So thank you both very much for such a time, and we'll be in touch with all the viewers on ways in which they can get access to the information that Fletcher and Ethan shared today, and what next steps are coming up in the further years. So thank you both.
Thanks very much, Aaron. Great to be with you. Good to meet you, Ethan.
Good meeting you, Fletcher.
Yep.